So there's some things you should do, or at least look at, before you kind of move immediately to Flash. And I don't have the first one on there, and I probably should have just started here. It just kind of occurred to me. But the number one thing, you want to make sure you have a storage performance problem. And as a rule of thumb, this is certainly not a perfect science, but one of the quickest ways to tell is if your CPU utilization is low and your performance is bad, that means probably the CPU is waiting on something, and it probably means the CPU is waiting on storage. 9 times out of 10, that's exactly what's happening. So that's one thing to do, is kind of confirm that you do indeed have a storage problem. I would say most cases nowadays it is. Then kind of get into some of these specific things. One of the things that we see as a big challenge is file system fragmentation, and this happens a lot in Windows environments, and a lot of people I think nowadays are surprised that even comes up, because you probably have this on a shared SAN or something like that. Well, the SAN only has so much visibility. Once you assign a volume to a Windows server, it can't really control what's happening inside that assignment, right? And so Windows could still fragment. So what we recommend is looking at tools that can kind of in an inline fashion defragment or make sure that data is written in a continuous fashion. That becomes important because it can be about a 25% additional I/O load on a highly fragmented system, and that's pretty easy to do. The second and third ones are a little harder, and this specifically in the Microsoft SQL environment or a database environment in general. But first is index and query optimization. What we see here is a lot of, especially queries that just aren't needed anymore, or indexes against the wrong columns, or columns that don't need to be indexed, or columns that do need to be indexed. So kind of looking at those, and there's a couple of different tools that you can get for that. The third is application code optimization, and that is the hardest, right? Is making sure that the code is actually written correctly. I'm assuming that most of the people on the webinar today are probably storage administrators, so they don't, even if they did have access to the code, they wouldn't probably want to mess with it anyways. So that becomes probably the hardest thing to do and requires some interface with your database development team. And then finally is network improvements. This one to me is really important, and one you can't sort of overlook. You've got to make sure that the network is up to snuff to be able to deliver. And that, by the way, is true no matter where you put Flash. If it's hyperconverged or shared, the network does become a gating factor.